Okay, welcome to a lesson on factor by grouping. Okay, so we just learned how to factor out a GCF from a polynomial. So you might look at something like this, and the first thing we're going to try and do is see if we can factor a GCF out. So I asked myself, is there any number that goes into 14, 35, 6, and 15? And there isn't. So there's no number that goes into those. As well as you look at them, there isn't an x that can come out of all of them because the 15 has no x in it. So therefore, we can't take an x out. So there's no greatest common factor. But we can factor these cubic polynomials. So we notice that it's a cubic for starters. Okay, and that's one of the things that we're going to recognize. And it has 4 terms. Okay, so this cubic polynomial with 4 terms, even though we can't take a GCF out, okay, which is always the first thing we're going to try and do, there is a way of factoring these into a simpler form, and we call it grouping. Okay, and the easiest way to describe it is to just take this problem, okay, and we're going to rewrite it right underneath it, okay, and I have 14 x cubed plus 35x squared. I'm just rewriting my problem. And you could do it right on your sheet where my problem is, but I want to write it so I have it a little cleaner for you. Okay? There's the polynomial rewritten, and all we're going to do is we're going to create 2 small problems just like we just learned by grouping, and we're going to group this with 2 sets of parentheses. Okay? And then we're going to take a look at that, and we're going to factor the 2 individual groups. So the first group we're going to factor is the 14x plus, and I'm going to write them a little bigger now, 14x cubed plus 35x squared. So there's my first group. Okay? And then my second group I'm going to factor is right next to it. And it's going to be the negative 6x minus 15. Okay, and I'm going to treat these separate. So I'm going to ask myself, hold on one sec. Okay, I'm going to say, which one of these, let me move this a little bit here. Let me try this. I'm just going to slide this guy a little bit to the right. Perfect. Okay, so I have 2 groups that I've made from that polynomial. Okay, and I'm going to factor these separate just like I just learned in the previous unit. So I'm going to ask myself, what number goes into 14 and into 35? And hopefully from the last unit, we remember that 7 goes into those. So I'm going to put a 7 out in front. And which variable can I take out? Well, I can take an x out, and how many can I take out of each term? I can take 2 x's out of the second one, and I could take 2 x's out of the first one. So 7x squared is my GCF. And then what I would be left with inside, 14 divided by 7 is 2. And if I had 3 x's and I took 2 x's out front, I'd be left with 1 x. On the second term, if I took a 7 out, which means I'm dividing 35 by 7, I would be left with a positive 5. Okay, and then if I took both x's out, I wouldn't have any x's left, and that would be what it would look like. Okay, now over in my second pair, I'm going to do the same thing. But the unique thing here is if I do my work correctly, I'll be left with the same term inside. Okay, and I already just noticed a typo on my page. This 16 here is supposed to be a 15. Okay, I just copied it wrong. All right, so if I do my factoring of this group correctly, okay, I'm going to end up with the same thing in parentheses as I ended up in the other one. So what is my common factor between -6 and -15? And remember, if there's a negative in the first term, we're going to take out a negative. So I know my GCF is a negative, okay? And I know there's 6 does not go into 15, but my other factors of 6 are 3, so 3 is my GCF. And since I can't take an x out of either, that becomes my GCF. So if I divide -6 by -3, I'd be left with 2. I didn't take any x's out, so I have the 2x. And if I divide -15 by the -3, I have 2x plus 5. Okay, so what I want you to understand here, guys, is that the 2x plus 5 and the 2x plus 5, they have to be the same thing. Okay, so those two there have to be the same piece. If they're not, you made a mistake. Maybe you didn't take out the correct GCF. Maybe you took it out incorrectly. Maybe you picked the right GCF but took it out. But at this step, those two things in parentheses have to be the same. And why they have to be the same is that the next step, we're going to take these two pieces, okay, and I'm just going to bring that together a little bit, okay. We're going to take these two pieces, and I'm actually going to factor out the 2x plus 5. I'm going to take this 2x plus 5, watch what I do here. I'm going to give myself a little more room. I'm going to move the 2x plus 5 over here, okay. I'm going to take this 2x plus 5 and I'm going to factor it out front from both of these. I'm going to take that out, and the 2x plus 5 is now going to be out here only once, right? Because I'm taking it out of this entire expression, and what I'll be left with is 7x squared minus 3. Okay? And that's how we factor by grouping. So, let's recap. We knew it was a cubic with 4 terms, okay? And that's what identified to us that we're going to be using a different method. And the method we're going to be using is factor by grouping. And what we mean by grouping is we're going to use parentheses. So I put parentheses, okay, always around the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. That's what I did in this step. Then I took those terms and I broke them out just into 2 pieces on my page, so I had a little more room, and I factored them individually. Out of this one, I took out the 7x squared times the 2x plus 5, and out of this one, I took out the -3, and I was left with 2x plus 5. And we talked about that it was very important that the insides of these are the same. If they're not the same, you have to stop there, and you made a mistake. You have to go back and check, okay? Once I did that, I have a common factor now in these 2 terms. And I can again take that common factor out. The common factor is the 2x plus 5. I just took it out of both of those and I brought it out front, and now it sits by itself as 1. And what I'm left inside with is just the 7x squared minus the 3. So inside, I'm left with the 7x squared minus the 3. So here's my inside pieces. And after I factor the 2x plus 5s out, they become 1. And I can bring that 7x squared minus 3 together. So I hope that makes sense. I'm just going to leave that as this video, and then I'm going to do 2 more examples or 3 more examples in the following video. Okay? So maybe watch that one more time. Make sure it makes some sense. You can try the second example if you'd like, or you can move on to the next video, which will go through the second example. Thanks, guys, for listening.